Hello, thank you very much for purchasing a workshop space for this introduction to basket twining. So this short tutorial is just a refresher to guide you through the process of beginning and some of the information that sometimes just escapes your mind when you're trying to learn everything that you need to walk away from a workshop. Okay, so let's just get started. Okay. So what we have is 16 lengths. Now these ones are 25 centimeters long. I'm not aiming to make a big basket for this tutorial. As you can see, I've got a high-tech piece of equipment here holding all of these spokes together. All I've done is just lay them out in 2 groups of 8 over the top of each other. Now this is a little bulky, but I think this will be the easiest way to get started. If you want to venture out and do more of a crossed pattern like this, it's 16 again, but you would group them into groups of 4 and then lay them over the top of each other like a lattice work. Okay. So with your length, just jumped ahead. But what I have here, I've got a contrast color just so you can see how the twining happens with this cord. While you're learning, don't grab a cord length that's longer than you can handle. At the moment, I have a folded over length that's an arm span in length. It will twist on itself as you're working, but you can just run your fingers through it to detangle it as you go. With it folded in half, I've looped this over the top. I've moved that away and I'm going to secure this either with my thumb and move around. But what I do find for a little more control is to place it on the table. Just like so. Right, and hopefully it's staying in focus. Now I'm going to hold this down. Now do not worry, do not fret if this is a little bit loose when you first start. The first ones are always a little tricky and fiddly to start with. Now, I'm right-handed, but the principle for the left-handed is similar. The spoke that's gone, the working yarn that's gone behind stays down, while the one in front goes across and behind the next, just like so. And this movement is what we'll do for the entire basket. So holding them down, I'm going to tighten that up just a little bit if you can see, without smushing all of the spokes together. The one that's behind is laying down. The one that's out the front and to the left is moving in front and behind the next to group them in place. Holding it down with my finger, moving around, down, and twisting. Don't worry if these 2 sides are not even. Once we've gotten a few rounds done, you can pull these and even them out. Can you see that layer has gone underneath? Just be careful, especially on that first round, that the second row doesn't twist in underneath that first loop. So holding that on top and just giving it a tug to tighten and holding it in place. I'm going to do one more full round of this. So come around. And then we'll talk about the next rounds. As the circumference of this base increases, we're going to be separating these fronds out and eventually they'll become individuals which will work. So this one's just been moved into groups of 2. It was originally worked in groups of 4 first. and then in another round that will go into singulars. That is 3 rounds. I definitely think it's time to move on. Right, so holding that one down again, detangle yourself. I'm going to check how flat this is laying and try and grab my closest Might take a moment just to distribute them and check. Now I'm going to split these into 2 groups of 4 now. So come around to the next one. So that's 4. Moving around. 4. I'm not worried about too much about how flat they're laying. 2, 3, 4. So you can see I've got gaps in here. That contrast colour in the spokes is going to show through, but you can go through and just make sure they're tightened. Just compact them down. And you can move. If you need to adjust, these can be pulled just ever so slightly. And just double check the length of these, that they should be relatively even as you go around. This will affect the overall height of your basket and sewing back in later if they're not even. So I'm going to continue to separate these into 2 and possibly do a few rounds of this. And then we'll get to singles. And then once we've done that, we'll get into the shaping. So what I'm aiming for with this basket is to have a large base and a small height on the walls. If you were looking for a small circumference or diameter, small diameter and longer walls, you would go with less spokes. So this one here has 8, and over the top here it was 4 and 4 overlapped to start here. So having 8 in total has given me 16 spokes, and I'm keeping this to a small diameter of, there's about 4 centimeters on this. So, and that'll change with the material that you're using as well and what fibers. So this is a nice little one, and I've kept the spokes short because I'm only going to make just a tiny little vessel. Okay. All right. So, okay. So I've worked several rounds with the 2 spokes held together. Let's see, I'm not going to count the rounds, but you can see how they're fairly balanced in size for the rows on either side. You will notice, particularly when you're working with a thicker cord, there will be, an imbalance on either side if you need to just complete the round. So going in the same fashion, pulling the rein down, I'm just going to bring in one spoke instead of two. Pull that cord behind. Holding that one down now. This one goes around the back. Hold that on the table. You get to a point where you'll just be more comfortable holding this up in your hands rather than down. I'm going to do one round of this, and I'm going to start then going up and shaping the side. Okay, I've gotten to a point. I'm running out of cord, twine. So you can see just where they're sitting. I'm just going to leave them where they are, around that spoke. Now they're going to be sewn down through the channels to follow in with the line of these spokes. So before I do that, I like to just keep them in place rather than sew them in now. I'm going to hold them down, and I've got a contrast colour. It is the same as the spokes, but just to show you the next rounds as we start to go up into the basket. With my length folded in half, I'm going to put it around this spoke that these two are around. Pop it in place here. The same, we're going to move through in the same motion. I'm going to hold all of that out of the way, the one at the back down, and grab the one that's at the front over the top and around the back, just as before. I hold that down, and that halved piece is going to want to twist a little bit. Just going to hold that down, hold all of it down again, and come around. Just going to go do one round of that and come back. So we've completed one round with the new colour, and I've just come past that point, that starting point. I'm going to start going up. Now with basketry, you're not going to have a sharp, clear edge. That's another technique that you can do to the spokes. What we are going to do is move in the same fashion, but rather than just moving around and working each individually flat, it is helpful to bring your work upright. This is my base, standing up. I'm working this way. Now looking from the outside of my basket, moving in the same motion. So if you're left-handed, you'll be working in this way, but still looking at the work in the same direction, the same view. So it's down, around, and down. And down. So as you start doing the rounds, just holding those spokes up in the same motion, moving around, but keeping them a little bit tighter. You're not going to see a difference in those edges on the first round. If you can see in here, it's taking, there's 3 rounds on here, and you can start seeing how that's curving up. This is where it can be helpful to find the best place you can put it on the table and work them up like this. Just like so. It's a little bit hard to film it in this direction to show you the movements, but this is also a really effective way to get your sides started, like so. Or if you've got a jar, a can like we had before, you can also show you, pop your cover over the top and work around this, and this will help create the edges and also create stability while you're working the wall as well. So just make sure you go down and pack them down. If you've got little gaps, tighten it up like like so, and we'll just keep going until we've got the sides in a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to do another color change. These ones are a little bit longer. All you need to keep is a length long enough that you can pop on a darning needle and sew back through. This one's quite short, but adequate. These ones you could go for a little bit longer, but I've just done a color change and I'd like to keep to that band consistent. So I'm bringing in a new one, again, folded in half. I've got working yarn at the back here, laying at the front, this one here, and I'm going to add my new one in between here on this spoke. Let's get a tight fit on that, and try not to pull it across while you're working. Keep that in the center there. Hold everything down. Bring that around. Okay, I'm going to go through and tidy those threads up really soon because they are a nuisance being there. I'm working up, so I'm going to very carefully just hold that in place. I move around. We're going to keep going with this round and then we'll sew those ends in. All right, coming towards the end of this now. Got a nice little bowl. Been forming the walls. Got a curved edge and our base. So now that I've run out of cord, we're going to sew all of these ends back in and we're going to work the top. So you'll need a sizable darning needle for this. So just like before, come around the back of this one, around the front of this one. I am going to come down and through here, through that spoke. With such a large blunt darning needle, there's very little chance I am going to pierce any of these threads. Now, it can be quite tight pulling this through. If you get stuck, this one's going to be nice and easy. I recommend using a pair of pliers. I'm not going to pull this through too tight. Very gently pull it in. Do not pull too tight. You do not want to distort the shape of your basket. Okay, so I've just sewn the top threads through. I've just come through into the green. There's no need to go any further down into that cream section. This distance should be more than enough to secure it. I'm going to trim really close to the basket. Try not to trim any of the threads that you've worked. Okay. Sometimes I have a little gap here, if you can see. Just adjust that. And they'll be hidden in place. All right, so let's go through onto our green ones here, these first ones. I'm going to go with the right hand side one first. Hope you can see. This was the cream, the new cream thread that we had folded in half that went around. With this one here at the back on the right, I'm going to come across and go down the back of this one. So this front one here, to close up the gap underneath that new thread that we added in, I'm going to come across and sew down into this one. So they're sewing across in, once they've left this one, they're getting sewn into the one next to it. Those words make sense. Maybe just seeing the visual can be helpful. And the base is quite tight. I can already feel it's going to be quite a tight pull through with this darning needle. So I'm going to recommend getting a pair of pliers and pulling through. Now this is gentle work. When you pull, you do not want to distort any of the work that you've put into your basket. Okay, So I haven't pulled right through. It's just enough to get it through those worked loops. And you can see it's hidden in there. I'm going to close up that little gap now by working this one across. That's lucky. Let me give some of these flyaway ones a trim, see if you can see it clearer. That's where our join happened here, nice and smooth. Trim these off. Same again with this. I'm going to work the right side one here. Not this one, this one. This is quite a hairy hemp, so I'm not actually cutting the twine, I'm cutting these loose parts off, which doesn't affect the integrity of the yarn. This one, you can see the gap here, and I can see that spoke still there. I'm going to come across to close that gap. So I'm going to insert my needle to the other side of that spoke and draw down and through. See how that's closed that up, that gap up. Trim these loose ends. Hemp is a compostable material, so don't throw them in the bin. You can pop them in your compost and they will break down. Now let's finish up. Basket now sits on the table. All of these spokes now to sew through. Now to finish, the easiest way to finish is to take a spoke and sew it down into the next one. Take a spoke, sew it down into the next one, which would give you a rim like this. You would just see the little loops over the top. Another way to finish is to take a spoke, take it behind two, and sew it down, which is what I'm going to do now, and that'll give you a nice little looped finish over the top. So for your first one, I'm going to take this, take one, go around the back and sew it down. Now I will not trim or tighten any of these until the very end. And for the first one especially, we're going to pull this through and we're going to leave a little loop, and do that for the first two, so around the back of two. And my spokes are really short, so having a little bit of trouble holding on to them in the needle. So ideally, by the time you finish, when you go to finish your basket, I have a length here of 6 centimeters. 6 centimeters. and I'm finding it quite tight because of the length of my needle as well. So I would recommend that you have at least 8 to 10 centimeters to be really comfortable in bringing your spoke onto the needle and sewing it through. Because if these are really short, that's not a problem. Just insert your needle first. And then pop your yarn in. Just like that. Especially if you're working with a natural material, you're unlikely to have the luxury of length. So I've gone behind 1, 2 for this spoke, and then pulling it through. I'm going to go through and we'll tighten all of these up later, but you can see it's starting to give us a nice little looped rim on the top. I'm going to do this one more time. So for this spoke, I'm going to go behind this one here, the second one across. And pull it through. All right, we'll come back when we come back around to this edge, to the last one here. Okay, almost come full circle and sewn in each of the spokes through. The very end I'll go through and trim all of these off. So at the beginning we kept the first couple looped up just to make it easier to take this spoke and bring it down behind these threads like before to keep in that pattern. So behind the second one across, behind and sewing down, just like so. Let's give this a tug. I can pull that one down now. Grab my last one. It's behind the second one, this one here. Right there. And pull it through. Okay, my rim is done. I'm going to trim some of these floaters again. I'm going to come through like when we did the thread change. I'm going to trim these as close as I can to the basket without trimming the other yarns. I'll just do a couple and then I'll show you. I have just pulled the needle through a distance that I could handle with my hands. You need to have a good maybe 20 mil at least to an inch, sorry, 2.5 centimeters, 2 to 2.5 centimeters for them to stay secure. What you do not want is for any of these to lift up. Now I've pulled them down. If you want, you can, before you trim, just give all of these a firm tug and make sure that they are secure before trimming. Quite a sturdy basket. You can see a couple little trim points here. All that means, just flick that across and they'll hide themselves.